The first and the most famous theory about Draco Malfoy is that he's a werewolf. The theory is based primarily on Harry's observations of an opponent in his sixth school year. Remember, just over and over again, at the sight of Draco, the main character notes how bad he looks. Outward fatigue, paleness, and doom. According to him, the Slytherin student even refuses himself with the usual joys, such as Quidditch. Some fans began to dig deeper into this topic and remembered a few things. Firstly, when Malfoy is visiting Corbin and Burke's, he threatens the store owner with an acquaintance with Greyback. Fenrir's name is well known and inspires fear primarily with the consequences of meeting him. Draco is smart enough to use this fear, perhaps even without actually having the ability to use werewolf powers. Pomposity and loud statements are quite in his spirit and can be even called his weakness. But since Malfoy has often used such tools, he clearly knows how they work. The second thing noted by the fans is the appearance of Greyback at Hogwarts at the end of the school year. And here the situation is strikingly different. To Dumbledore's reproach about Fenrir getting into the school, the young man retorts, "I didn't," briefed Malfoy. "He was not looking at Greyback. He did not seem to want to even glance at him. I didn't know he was going to come." As a result, we see how Malfoy's opinion about his colleague has changed. But why? In the summer of 1996, apparently, Draco acquires a dark mark and becomes a Death Eater. For him, this is a confession. The Slytherin is encouraged. He became like his father and also got the auspices of the Dark Lord. It's easy to read Malfoy's moods in the compartment of the Hogwarts Express. The guy flaunts and splurges in front of his fellow students. But we see that by winter his opinion changes. Most likely, initially, the Dark Lord's assignment wasn't accompanied by threats. Voldemort saw that he could play on Draco's vanity. However, the complexity of the task to destroy the headmaster of Hogwarts, as well as a sober assessment of the situation by Narcissa, should have changed the young man's perception. By New Year, Malfoy had not made any progress in his task. For the Dark Lord, the weakness of his minion has become even more obvious. So, on the one hand, Draco, as his servant, can be put to waste, and on the other hand, the Dark Lord can stimulate Draco with punishment. That is why, if Greyback ever bitten Malfoy, it probably had happened during this period. Just after that, Draco loses self-confidence, the desire to serve to the Dark Lord, and, most likely, respect for his father. Such an action would very well explain such changes in Malfoy's behavior, although many think that all the changes should be attributed to his failure. Finally, the Malfoy's transition to the opposite side at the end is explained not only by fear for their son, but also by the fact that Voldemort deprived their family of the pureblood status, since now the only heir has become worse than a half-breed, a werewolf. This theory was not so easily refuted, but JK Rowling herself destroyed it on Twitter when she simply said that it was not. Actually, the fact that the writer drew attention to this hypothesis speaks of its viability. After all, this theory really explained a lot, or at least supplemented it. The fans needed new answers to the old questions, so they got them in a slightly different way. A second fan theory claims that Voldemort blackmailed Draco by killing Narcissa. In general, if you recall the beginning of the sixth book, it's easy to wonder. Narcissa went to Snape, and despite the Dark Lord, got an unbreakable vow from him. How she managed to hide this fact from Voldemort is unclear, but there is a suspicion that her occlumency skill is at a very high level. This allowed her to trick the Dark Lord at the end of the saga. As we remember, Snape tried to use legitimacy on Draco, but it turned out that he was trained to defend himself, which was followed by an assumption about the lessons with Aunt Bella. But it is much more logical to take lessons from a beloved mother, and here we may see one more confirmation of the Narcissus' ability for occlumency. But let's go back to the theory of blackmailing by violence. Here we have the same questions as in the first theory. Why is Draco's attitude to the activities of the Death Eaters changing? Where does his self-confidence disappear? And finally, why does his attitude towards his father change? The blackmail hypothesis answers all of the questions above. First of all, Draco still has bad outcomes, and the young man understands that despite the sins of Lucius, Narcissa and the younger Malfoy himself are not particularly involved in the failures. Second, his nervous behavior is associated with a constant threat to the mother, and the father, again, isn't able to protect her and does not find the determination to actively resist, not to mention the imprisonment in Azkaban. The theory does a good job of reinforcing the general explanations for Draco and his family's behavior right up to the final part. His mumbles and lack of desire to recognize his school enemies in Harry and Hermione can be explained very well by the threat to his mother and, of course, to himself. Two other popular theories involve Malfoy's relationship with the Gryffindors, and the first of them can hardly be called theory, since it has already been mentioned in the comments from JK Rowling, and although indirectly, this theory line has found its continuation in The Cursed Child. Remember how Draco admits that he was jealous for the strong friendship between Harry, Ron, and Hermione? Most likely he meant the late school years, but we are talking about the very beginning of the story. And here we may see the slight layering of two hypotheses. The first was Lucius Malfoy's assumption that Harry Potter was not just the chosen one, but the new future Dark Lord. And Draco, according to his conclusion, was supposed to allure Potter and to act as some kind of mediator between Harry and the Malfoy's family. The boys could spend their holidays together at Malfoy's manor, and Uncle Lucius would become a tutor and some kind of regent next to the new lord. What a beautiful solitaire it could be. The boy who defeated the Dark Lord would be the most powerful tool in the hands of Lucius. What a pity that it was the Weasleys, not Lucius, who fussed faster with their daughter. But the plan was ruined for at least two reasons. Firstly, the older Malfoy has absolutely no understanding of the nature of Dumbledore's concern for Harry and the extent of the headmaster's involvement in Harry's becoming the chosen one. Secondly, the boy himself is not inclined to the ideals of the Malfoy family, which is already noticeable from the first meeting with Draco. As a result, by the end of the first school year, Lucius became disappointed with the plan of manipulating Harry and switched to another plan, the plan with a diary. But let's get back to the potential friendship. It no longer concerns Malfoy's obvious desires, but the interpretation of his behavior. The fact is that Draco had only one model of behavior. While making acquaintances, he tried to trump his formal advantages related to the origin, wealth, and influence. It happened with Crabbe and Goyle, as well as girls from Slytherin. We see that Malfoy does not have a warm and strong relationship with the more independent Zabini and Nott. He is also trying to behave the same way with senior students when joining the Quidditch team, by buying significance with brooms for his father's money. Moreover, he is making a quite clumsy attempt to emphasize superiority over the other applicants for friendship with Harry, and aggression towards Ron and Hermione shows his ambition for not only to squeeze them out of the space around the boy with a scar, but to rise himself in the eyes of potential friend. It is clear that by the end of the first year, Draco is disappointed, like his father, and cannot let the situation go. Harry is formally the hero of the school and the entire magical community, and Draco is just the leader of the Slytherin faculty. However, he also dreams about winning competitions, accomplishing feats, and having close friends. One more theory is the most popular for the fan art. It suggests that Draco was in love with Hermione, and all the oppression is just an attempt to draw attention to himself. Actors Emma Watson and Tom Felton added fuel to the fire, discussing relationships between themselves in the childhood period. It would seem that the name-calling Mudblood should put an end to all such speculations, but actually it is the main and primary clue of all supporters of this theory. The fact is that in Snape's memory of the exam, he calls his beloved Lily Potter the same way, a Mudblood. So, fans are easily making an analogy between these two pairs of characters. This is kind of Romeo and Juliet from the two different opposing sides. In the case of Harry Potter, two faculties. And that's why fans began to look for signs of love and attention from Draco to Hermione. One of them will be presented in the following theory, but it concerns only movies. However, the other two signs that will be presented right now are more important. First one appears in the plot of Goblet of Fire. It happens during the World Quidditch Cup. Malfoy appears near the trio and warns the guys, in a mocking manner, about the approaching Death Eaters. He especially focuses on Hermione. Despite the fact that this appearance seems quite accidental, it's easy to conclude that in taking care of the girl, he's trying to save her from danger. Another case, which we have already mentioned earlier, Draco refuses to recognize Hermione at Malfoy Manor. However, he does not try to protect her during the torture by Bellatrix. You can add her Lucius' awareness of Granger's academic success, and the picture seems to fit itself. But all this may look quite far-fetched. JK Rowling noted by herself that the fans succumbed to the charm of actor Tom Felton rather than actually saw something good in Draco, especially in the book version. However, in the movie, there was a thing that could make ones pay their attention to it. At the beginning of the second part, Felton's Malfoy tears a page out of a book, and the next time we see a torn page is in Hermione's hand. However, it's not a fact that it's the same page from the same book. Many fans immediately assumed that Malfoy either handed her over the excerpt from the book directly or slipped it to his beloved one when she was already in the hospital wing. And it was then that Harry and Ron found it in the hand of petrified Hermione. But if to step back from the love theory and just reflect on the whole situation, it may as well turn out to be an independent hypothesis. Firstly, at the beginning of the Chamber of Secrets, Draco, despite not knowing the whole situation, is still the most aware student at Hogwarts. As Dobby hears and knows a lot, it's easy to deduce that Malfoy Jr. knows at least as much as the house elf. But at the same time, as he does not fully understand the whole picture and only relies on fragmentary data, he tries to restore the picture to the end by himself. He may know about Tom Riddle's diary, about the Chamber of Secrets, and also about the Basilisk. Malfoy Sr. and Riddle from the diary discuss a lot among themselves, and some of it, definitely, reaches the ears of young Slytherin. That is why he could tear out the page he needed. At the same time, we should keep in mind that Chris Columbus may simply want to demonstrate us the harmfulness of the boy or to try to confuse the audience with this episode. Malfoy also demonstrates his awareness in communication with Harry and Ron under a Polyjuice potion. But in the end, it's hard to assume from Draco's word that he really knows anything about the Basilisk. So, at this moment, the torn page transferring hypothesis fails. Draco can't give information to Hermione without knowing what it's about. With the destruction of the hypothesis, the rationality for love is also falling to pieces. Moreover, we're talking only about the scenario in the movie. In the books, Draco hadn't been noticed tearing out any pages at all. The next theory is mostly related to an interesting inaccuracy in the script, and we're talking about Malfoy's wand. In the first novel, about the boy who lived, it is mentioned that Ron took his older brother's wand to school, and Draco's mother bought one for him. But if the wand really chooses its owner, it turns out that both boys from the very beginning were at a disadvantage compared to the rest. How so? This can only be explained by the fact that close relatives with similar characters are similar in magical terms. Therefore, Ron tried out Charlie's wand in advance, and it agreed to serve him. For the same reason, Narcissa, with whom Draco had a stronger connection than with his father, found it possible to choose the most suitable tool for her son independently. However, let's remember the words of Slytherin in the Room of Requirement from the book Deathly Hallows. "Hold it, Potter!" He skied to a halt and turned round. Crabbe and Goyle were standing behind him, shoulder to shoulder, once pointing right at Harry. Through the small space between their jeering faces, he saw Draco Malfoy. "That's my wand you're holding, Potter," said Malfoy, pointing his own through the gap between Crabbe and Goyle. "Not anymore," panted Harry, tightening his grip on the hawthorn wand. "Winners keepers, Malfoy. Who's lent you theirs?" "My mother's," said Draco. In the movie, after these words, the scriptwriters added the phrase, "It's powerful, but it does not obey me." Thus, there are more questions than answers. By the way, Neville Longbottom also used not his wand, but his father's. Perhaps that's why it was so difficult for him to make charms and spells. Of course, some of the fan theories were about Draco's future after the Battle of Hogwarts. It is clear that new details were gradually revealed in the interviews of JK Rowling, as well as the publication of The Cursed Child, but this is the fate of any creation. The most memorable characters are overgrown with a bunch of hypotheses about the life continuation. Some of those hypotheses concern Draco's desire to break with the past as much as possible, first of all to make a formal impression for others. Already in The Cursed Child, we see Malfoy stepping back from society and avoiding too much attention. As a result, a hypothesis that Scorpius was not Draco's own son was born not even among the fan, but among the characters of the piece. There were rumors of the time traveling by using the Time Turner, where Astoria conceived a boy with Voldemort. It even seemed that the title of the play, along with Albus Potter, might have been about Scorpius. But let's get back to the desire to break with the past. The first hypothesis was the idea of disowning the Malfoy family by taking Black's surname. According to the authors, to make this, Draco had several reasons. Firstly, Blacks, who at least in some form were participating in the magic war, were divided in half. Sirius became a real Marith and hero. Regulus eventually chose the right path, and many found out about it. Andromeda's daughter defended justice to the last, and Narcissa eventually helped the chosen one. And only Bellatrix clearly acted on the side of evil, but her last name at that time sounded like Lestrange, so it also did not cause any problems. Malfoys, on the other hand, were strongly associated with aiding the Dark Lord and with shameful groveling. Moreover, the family's home became the gathering point for the Death Eaters for a whole year. There was also a dungeon for prisoners, and a variety of crimes were committed at this place. For example, the murders of Charity Burbage and Dobby the House Elf, as well as the torture of Hermione. Secondly, there were also personal reasons, since Draco simply changed his views on life, which now diverged very much from his father's, in particular in a matter of raising children. At least, the young man could threaten his father with such a development of events if he would pry into the life of the younger generations of the Malfoy house too strongly. As we understand from The Cursed Child, nothing of this kind was implemented, but still, this hypothesis is very interesting and not the only one existing. The second way to serve the society was to become an Auror. But it should be noticed that we are talking about a later period after the events of The Cursed Child. The fact is that it is quite difficult to imagine someone with a mark on their hand among Aurors, especially when it comes to such an odious character as Malfoy Jr. However, after the events of the Cursed Child's plot, the Auror's job seemed much more real and even more based on the motivation of the character. First of all, Draco did get along a bit with Harry after the joint operation devoted to Voldemort's neutralization. Secondly, the Slytherin himself was now directly affected by the dark forces, so he could well devote time and effort to combat Voldemort's legacy and new, albeit smaller, villains. In this context, there is a more surprising fan theory. It claims that Draco spent some time in Azkaban. Indeed, we know almost nothing about Malfoy's life immediately after the Battle of Hogwarts. As a result, we certainly know that the pure-blooded family remained free, while Dolores Umbridge apparently got a life sentence, although she didn't have a mark on her arm. But at least for the period of the official investigation, Lucius and Draco could spend some time in Azkaban too. However, we should keep in mind that the prison has changed a lot after the mentors left, so staying in it turned out not to be so difficult. We personally don't really like the last three theories about Draco as an Auror, Azkaban, and the change of surname. But for the final part of our narrative, we left the most absurd and most realistic theories about Draco's future. So let's start with the absurd one. It claims that Malfoy asked Harry Potter for a help to get rid of the black mark. However, there are at least two rebuttals of this theory. First of all, according to Rowling, the mark became very dim and did not bring any special problems to its bearer. Therefore, it did not make much sense to get rid of it. Second, and it seems quite confusing, why does Draco need to ask Harry for help? He is not a specialist in magic tattoos, plus there is, to put it mildly, a strained relationship between these young men. Potter could, of course, remove Draco's mark with Sectum Sempra, like in old good days, but apparently he hasn't done it. Much more sensible is the hypothesis that the Malfoy Manor has been sold after the Battle of Hogwarts. The only thing is that such a move could not be Draco's sole decision, because this is his parents' house. Together they could have taken such step, since the house was bringing a lot of negative memories. We have already mentioned the murders, the guests such as full squad of the Death Eaters, as well as the establishment of the prison in the basement, plus humiliation and even tortures from Voldemort. But the question arises, who could buy a mansion for such a good round sum? Could Malfoys recall the old days before the statute of secrecy was adopted and began to trade with the Muggles again? Another theory is related specifically to the plot of the Cursed Child. As we know, the mother of Scorpius, Astoria, due to the poor health, felt ill and died. It is not very common for wizards to pass away in a relatively young age. The fans decided that everything could happen because of the curse and not from anyone but from Delphi, the daughter of Voldemort. To be honest, I do not see any deep reason for such an act. It wasn't very helpful in the case of recruiting Scorpius. Rumors about the conception of the child with Voldemort shouldn't have touched Delphine too much. And finally, Delphi shouldn't have had any personal account with Astoria either. Only all sorts of opinions with revenge on the Malfoys in general are possible. Briefly telling, it's rather vague hypothesis. And our icing on the cake of the theories tells us, I open up at the end. The most interesting theory claims that Draco is the son of Severus. In fact, fans are more accustomed to bring Severus and Lily together, and also trying to build a family network between him and Harry. Apparently, they did not notice at all a much more likely option. So let's start with Lucius and Narcissa's relationship. The task of any conservative family is to leave an heir. Taking into account Narcissa's great love for Draco, she clearly looked like a sorceress who is ready to procreate again. Moreover, knowing that they managed to conclude such a wonderful pureblood marriage between the authoritative pureblood families, and the absence of children spoke only about the fact that in the marriage not everything was fine. Meanwhile, even after the wedding, the couple did not have their first child for a long time. They had to wait exactly a year after Severus graduated from school. Let's recall what happened further. When Narcissa needs help for Draco, she chooses Severus and for some reason clearly knows where to go in a poor Muggle neighborhood. Why does Narcissa know where Snape lives? And, in general, shows us that she has been here more than once. Further, we recall that Severus eventually ends up at Hogwarts and no longer lives in the Spinner's End. Finding him is not so easy, and you won't leave baby Draco alone as well. The connection between Narcissa and Severus seems at least strange, and at most close enough to be seen as something more than friendship. Yes, it's clear that Draco's appearance reminds Lucius. The elder Malfoy sees him as an heir, and in general nothing portends any additional meanings. But you must admit that the thing we mentioned above is a very strong argument. At the very end, we saved up a rather amusing hypothesis, stating that Draco was the only witness of Blaise Zabini's feelings for Ginny Weasley. It's quite amusing that this hypothesis implies the existence of Blaise's feelings for Ginny in general, and Malfoy's ability to keep the secrets is also in a serious doubt. What do you think about these theories? Could Draco be both a werewolf and Severus Snape's son? And did you like at least one theory about Malfoy's fate after Hogwarts? Or maybe you have your own theory about Draco? Then feel free to share it in the comments. And this is where our video comes to an end. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you all for your attention and see you soon.